Have you ever heard a person be described as having animal magnetism? Or have you ever had an experience in which you felt mesmerized? Here's where those words come from.
Cool, the really cool thing. So 1734 in Germany, Franz Anton Mesmer comes into the world. He grows up, I assume, from what I've read, like a pretty normal German kid, decides that he's going to go to university at the Jesuit college. Father Hell was a Jesuit also. I haven't been able to find out if there was a direct link there or if that's a coincidence, but he's clearly interested in science, and he publishes his doctoral dissertation in 1766 on the influence of the planets on the human body. Now, this is not medical astrology, but actually him trying to really get into Newtonian physics. And he's looking at, there was a lot of curiosity at the time around the effect of like the moon on the tides and stuff like that. And so he was looking into, since we have water in our bodies and fluid in our bodies, were we susceptible to this as well? And so that was his doctoral dissertation. In 1774, he starts collaborating with Father Hell, who had been using the lodestones and the metal plates to treat people medically, right? Well, Mesmer starts going a step further. He starts preparing like a tonic with iron in it and having people actually drink this preparation with iron so that the iron is inside of them, the high dose of iron, right? We all have iron anyway, but like
I
really,
bet there wasn't an IRB back then. I had to make research for it. I mean, really? Okay, carry on.
So then he's putting magnets on the people after having them take this preparation with iron in it, in the belief that the magnets would influence the solution within their bodies. And he's getting some results with this. He finally gets to a point where he says, we don't need the solution. People naturally have this magnetic fluid in their bodies. And if I just if I use my magnetism to influence their magnetism, I can help treat people that way. And so he starts doing this, where he's just really working on this idea of using his magnetic energy to shape and exert influence on other people's magnetic energy. So he ends up publishing a paper on that, in which he actually comes up with the term animal magnetism. And this is what he keeps practicing for years. He's going around and he's using what he believes is animal magnetism to cure a variety of maladies in people. So from 1774, when he starts collaborating with Mesmer, you go all the way up to 1784, about a decade, right? And in 1784, King Louis XVI appoints a commission. I should fill in the gap. Mesmer had been in Vienna for a while. He failed to cure a young musician of her blindness. And it was sort of scandalous. Like, he had been getting this good reputation, and he failed to cure this young woman of her blindness. He thought he could. And so that was sort of a scandalous thing. And he was sort of like shamed, and he left Vienna and went to Paris. So he sets up shop in Paris, and he's doing his thing in Paris. And finally, in 1784, King Louis XVI says, I want to know what's going on with this. So he commits a Royal Academy committee to investigate what Mesmer's doing. Now, not so much from the literature I've read, not so much whether Mesmer was getting results. It was clear that he was. Like, people were coming to him, he was doing his thing, they were leaving feeling better and having a removal of symptoms and reduction in symptoms. So he was clearly getting results. But what the king wanted to know was, had he discovered a new physical fluid that had been previously undiscovered? So he appoints Lavoisier, who's a chemist, Monsieur Guillotin, who invented the guillotine, who was a physician, Jean-Sylvain Bailly, who was an astronomer, and Ben Franklin comes over for a visit at the time. And so he asked Ben Franklin, since he was a science guy, if he would sit on this committee as well. So Lavoisier, Guillotin, Bailey, and Franklin, they sit on this committee, and Mesmer does his thing and lets them observe. And they at the end of it all say, well, it's clear that you got results, but there's no evidence that there's any kind of, physical fluid that you're manipulating. It really just seems like people are creating these changes through the power of their own imagination. So even though they weren't seeking to really attack Mesmer, it put a pretty big ding in his reputation, and his career pretty much all went downhill from there. But by a year later, 1785, he leaves Paris, goes back to Vienna, and then literally, like, there's very little about the rest of his life from there. It seems like his professional reputation declined, and he never really did anything of note, apparently, because nothing was really documented from there on. So, that's the quick version, right? That's the Cliff Notes version of Mesmer. Two biggest things that people take for granted nowadays is we still use the term animal magnetism to describe someone who sort of exudes a confidence, a charisma about them, right? And we also use the word mesmerized, because animal magnetism eventually became referred to as mesmerism, since he was the creator. And people still talk today about being mesmerized, and all of that traces back to Mr. Mesmer. It's another great example of how you look back through the history, and the people who contributed were at the time learned people who really were trying to study science and advance science. They just had the science wrong,
And that's kind of, Descartes had the science wrong too.
Right?
Yeah, to me, it speaks a lot to the weight of politics, the media, and simplifying science, causing the baby in the bathwater to be thrown out.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's another great example of that, of there were people who had different agendas to push at the time. And, when he failed in Vienna, from the reading I was doing, when he failed in Vienna to heal the musician, it was clear that really he left because he knew he had sort of become shamed. But when he went to Paris, like, his reputation went with him. It wasn't like he was a stranger in Paris. And when he set up shop in Paris, there were pretty much two camps of people, right? There was a whole set of there was one camp of people who were like, this guy's a charlatan, he's just full of it, and you shouldn't go to him. And then there was another camp of people who were like, look, he's been doing something, he's been helping people, he's on to something, you just don't understand it. And I'm like, well, that's no different than today, right? There's still that
Exactly
going on today.
Dr. Oz, sorry.
But confirmation bias, right? Like, people choose what they want to believe, and they're going to believe it pretty much no matter what. So,
exactly. Yeah.